In section 2.5, the formula we're going to look at is finding the mean of a grouped frequency table. So you can see the formula there, and if we look at the red highlights, that is the symbol sigma, the Greek letter sigma. That stands for finding the sum, or kind of adding everything up. The next letter we have is F, and that's our frequency, which is basically just how often something is happening or occurring. And M is going to stand for our midpoint in this case. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide, where we'll find just the simple average, and then we're going to apply that idea to finding the average or mean of a grouped frequency table. If we were going to just find the average from 3 simple data pieces, then we represent the average with x bar. So our x bar, or average, would be equal to the sum of all of our data. So in this case, 2 plus 4 plus 6, and I'm going to divide by how many there are. So there's 3 pieces of data that will be divided by 3. So 6 and 4 is 10, plus 2 is 12. And we're going to find here that our average is going to come out to be 4. So here's an example where I have a grouped frequency table. So this is going to be a bit more complex if I want to find some kind of average or mean. So in the traditional average formula, what I wanted on top was the sum of the data. Well, I actually don't even know what any specific piece of data is. All I have is intervals. So all I have is intervals over here, 0 to 3.5, 3.5 to 7.5, but I don't know what any of those actual data pieces are. So rather than add up the data pieces that I don't have, I'm going to go ahead and find the midpoint of each of them. So I'm going to add a column right in here, and I'm going to find the midpoint in each of them, and I'm going to go ahead and find the sum of those midpoints instead. So the midpoint is going to be adding up the lowest and the highest point and then dividing by 2. So for this first one here, from 0 to 3.5, to find this midpoint, I'm going to go ahead and go 0 plus 3.5 and then divided by 2, because that's 2 pieces of data, and then I'll go ahead and put that right there. I'm going to take a minute and just repeat that process for this entire list. Our next goal for the numerator of our average is going to be adding up all of the data pieces. Now, since we didn't have the individual data pieces, I used the midpoints instead. But the other thing we need to consider is how many are represented in each interval. So for that first interval of 0 to 3.5, that has a midpoint of 1.75, there was 3 teenagers that fit that category. So what I've done is I've come down here and said, okay, we have 1.75 for the midpoint of that interval, but there was 3 people in that category. And so that's going to be the first thing that I add. And then to that, I'm going to add, okay, the next interval is here, which was an average or midpoint of 5.5. And how many people were in that category? 7. So there's 7 people that are representing that 5.5 midpoint. And in the next category, there was 12 teenagers represented by a 9.5 midpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and add in that 9.5 times 12. And if I continue this process, I'm going to get to a total sum of 409.75. And that's going to be the numerator of my formula. So let me come down here, and I'm going to put that 409.75 right here. And then the only other thing I need is my denominator, and that's going to be the sum of the frequencies. So here's my frequencies over here. So I can just go ahead and add those up and then put those down there. When I do that, I get 38. Now I have everything that I need to calculate this mean. And so when I divide those two numbers, I get about 10.78. And let's just think about what that means. So that's 10.78 hours. So that means on average, I'm looking at 10.78 hours of video game playing. And if I come back and I look at my table here, I might see that the most number of teenagers are right here in the middle, which were in the 7.5 to 11.5 hours. And so that seems just about right. It seems like my answer is accurate to get an average of 10.78 hours.